Good morning, guys. I see there's quite a lot of you that got out of bed early this morning for class. Very proud of you. Hi there. Let me just turn this on. Okay, still a couple of students joining, but let's just start with the intro in the meantime, so that we don't waste any of our precious minutes that we've got. Okay, so guys, yesterday we finished off learning unit 1, our role and environment of financial management. Remember, that's in the majority, that's a theory chapter, lots of theory questions that you're going to prepare answers for over there. And then yesterday we did the EVA, which is that calculation. So I hope you guys did work through those pages like I suggested to you for the EVA, and that you went through the example and that you tried that question. Did anybody have excuse me, did anybody have any problems when they went through EVA yesterday? Anything that they like completely didn't understand? Or not even that you didn't completely understand, something that you battled with when you did the example and the question? After going through that and reading that, is there anybody got any questions whatsoever about that EVA? It's best to ask the question now while it's still fresh in your mind. Because again, unfortunately, we're not going to be in the class until, okay, Megan, that's fine. We're not going to be in the class, unfortunately, until the 15th of March. And then we can start, and then, so let's just discuss that if there's anything, and then we can go on with today's work, which is going to be starting learning unit 2. So we should have, what did I work out? 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got 4 classes to cover learning unit 2. And learning unit 2 is a lot. There's a lot in this learning unit. So we have to just concentrate on each of our classes that we've got, and really work to make sure that we get through it in those 4 classes. And then what I'm hoping is I'm trying to work out the timetable so that we will have at least 1 session of our classes prior to the test that we can then use for some kind of revision. Because again, the timetables, it's really, really hard to timetable any extra sessions on our timetables, trying to coordinate everybody's timetables and venues. So yeah, asking for extra revision classes is really difficult. So, but we'll do our best. Okay, let's see what Megan wants. For the revision question, when you do NOPAT, they did not include the R&D. Is it because it was already added to the profit and loss for the previous year, as it was incurred at the end of 2001 and not 2002? Yes, I think, remembering the question, I think you're quite right, because remember, if we have an R&D expense and it was incurred in 2001, we add it back to NOPAT in 2001, the year in which it was expensed in the financials. We have to take it out of the financials the year in which it appeared in the financials. So in other words, make the NOPAT adjustment in the year in which the money was spent. And then it gets added back to the opening balance of the year following that. Okay. That's the trickiest part with EVA, is just making sure that you make the adjustments in the correct place. In other words, know what your NOPAT adjustments are and know what your invested capital adjustments are, and make sure you make the adjustment in the correct period. Any other questions? Okay, all right, awesome. So you guys are happy with that. And remember, guys, also, if you are working at home, you can send me an email with a question. There's no silly question at all, particularly not with this, this finance stuff and these formulas. They can be very confusing when you first encounter them. As the year goes on and you get used to them, they'll become more familiar, and you will definitely start understanding them because we use them throughout the year. But in the very beginning, it can be a little daunting, so that's fine. Any question is absolutely welcome. Okay, so then we're going to start our learning unit 2, time value of money. So this is your second test 1 chapter, just the first 2 for chapter 1. So what I've got up on the screen is just the page from the module outline, just to give us a short intro as to what time value of money is all about. And then we'll start looking at the actual calculations. So let's just read through their intro and then we can discuss it. So they say when money is borrowed, the person borrowing the funds, so that will be the person receiving the money. You are the borrower if you have gone and borrowed money from somebody else. If you've borrowed money from somebody, you have to pay whoever you've borrowed the money from for the use of those funds. Okay, I always think of it as that you are renting the money from somebody, because at some point you're going to give it back. So you go to them and say, can I please borrow this money for a while? They say, yes, you can borrow it, but while you've got my money, you have to pay me for the use of that money. It's kind of like rental for the money. And then at the end of the agreed period, you give the original capital sum back as well, or you pay it back over time, depending on what the agreement is. Okay, so that's the person who's borrowing the money. That means the person who's borrowing the money has then got a cost. Their cost is having to pay the rent for those funds. Conversely, so that means on the other side of the story, the person who is lending the funds, so the investor who's got the excess funds that's lending them to somebody else, they had all of this money at their disposal in their bank account, and now they've had to take it out of their bank account and give it to someone else and put it in someone else's bank account. So that means that lender is now sitting without the use of that money. They can't use it while they've lent it to somebody else. They are receiving rental for it, in other words, the interest, but they don't have the opportunity to use that lump sum for something else that might come up while it's still the agreed time that the other person has got the use of their money. Okay, so because of this this reason, you are being inconvenienced. I don't know if that's the right word, because you don't have the use of your money because you've lent it to someone else. This is why the borrower then charges a fee for the use of that money, which is the interest, for the use of the lender's funds. So in terms that you guys already understand, because this is one of the things that we looked at last year, is opportunity cost. So that interest rate and that amount of interest that the borrower is paying and the lender is receiving is payment for the opportunity cost to the lender, because he has given up the privilege of using the money. And it's an opportunity cost to the borrower, because the borrower has also now got the use of this money, but he's having to pay the opportunity cost. Is the opportunity cost for the use of the money is that he has to pay interest. Okay. And this is really what this interest payment is all about. And as always, this opportunity cost, or the interest and the interest rate, is determined based on the laws of supply and demand. Kind of, okay? Not entirely, but so in other words, money. So if there's a lot of cash in supply and the economy is very liquid, then borrowers can quite easily get hold of cash, so their rates will be down. And when there is a very short supply of cash in the market, then interest rates will increase because there's a scarce supply of money, and the lenders are then able to charge a much higher rate for the money than before. So that's kind of one of the things that affect the interest rate. Oversupply of cash in the market, interest rates go down. Short supply of cash in the market, and interest rates will go up. Okay. So what we're going to do in Learning Unit 2 is discuss this opportunity cost known as the time value of money. And we call it the time value of money because there is that agreed time period over which that money has moved from the lender to the borrower. So how much you're going to receive at the end of the day is also affected by the length of time that you're either going to have the use of that money for, or that the length of time that you've given someone else the use of your money. Okay. So that is part of, forms part of the calculation. So now let me just open the slides. Okay. So hopefully you guys can all see that. All right. So let's just have a look. So our module outcome, which means the entire module that we do in the semester, we are learning to actually apply practically important financial concepts such as time value of money and financial valuations. In other words, we're going to learn how to put a monetary value on certain financial instruments under conditions of uncertainty. And uncertainty equals risk. So wherever you see that word uncertainty, then you know there is risk involved. So we have to take time value of money and risk into account in our calculations when we are trying to come up with a financial valuation of some or other instrument. And that's really what this whole module is all about. So already with the EVA, we have looked at that financial concept of economic value added, wealth creation as opposed to profit maximization in a practical way. So now in this session today, we're going to understand concepts of future value and present value of a monetary amount, and also how to calculate the future and present value of a monetary amount for what we call single amounts, lump sum. So this is very important. Just remember that what the calculations that we're going to do today, the formulas that we're going to look at, are for lump sum. So what is a lump sum? What do you understand by a lump sum? If I say we're going to look at the present value of a lump sum of money, what does that make you think of in terms of cash? Like how will that cash change hands? What will the cash flow pattern be? Is what we term it. A single payment, yes. So a lump sum means I've got all of the cash. If I'm borrowing or lending 100,000, I'm taking the full 100,000 on one day. Lender gives it to the borrower, and on one day in the future, that 100,000 will be paid back from the borrower back to the lender. Very, very important, because later on we are going to then look at different types of cash flow patterns, and you must understand that the formula will be different depending on what the cash flow pattern is. And when you guys read through a scenario in a question, you must be able to recognize which cash flow pattern you're dealing with in the question, so that you can use the correct formula in working out your answer. Okay, so today, single payments, lump sums. That's just a quick recap of what we've already done. Finances, the study, creation, management of money, primary activities, all you did in LU1, wealth maximization. These are all the important things from LU1 and economic value added. Financial institutions and markets, the relationship between those two, and then what are the financial markets, which are capital markets, money markets. The interest rate elements, inflation, risk, premium, and time value of money. We look at more in Learning Unit 4, but we do have to take that into account in Learning Unit 2, because we also have to know when we are now going to be starting to use interest rates in our calculations, so we need to understand how do we derive that particular number of that interest rate that's being charged to us. So it's made up of 3 different elements added together to arrive at the total interest amount, and that's inflation, which you guys mostly understand, risk premium, as well as time value of money. All 3 of those things influence the amount of interest, the 8% or 10% or 12%. Why is the number that particular amount? Then time value of money. In other words, we're saying if I had 100,000 today and in 5 years' time, what will that 100,000 be worth? In other words, 5 years have passed. How has that affected the value of my money? The time value of money takes into account the impact of both interest, because remember, over time I will be paying or receiving that opportunity cost of interest, as well as inflation, because we also know that over time inflation happens, so that if I've got 100,000 today, what I can go and purchase with that 100,000 is going to be more, probably substantially more, than what I will be able to purchase with an identical amount of 100,000 in 5 years' time, because inflation will have increased prices over that time, and I will be able to come home with less in 5 years' time if I've still got 1,000 rand. So don't put your 1,000 rand under your mattress. Go and put it in some kind of savings account where you'll get some interest over those 5 years, because the price of goods is going to grow, so you need to grow your money to keep up with inflation as well. So our basic patterns of cash flow that I was talking about are lump sums, which is what we're going to look at today, annuities, which we'll do, what is today? Today's the 3rd, which we will do on Tuesday, as well as mixed cash flows. So I'll explain annuities and mixed cash flows when we get there. Okay, but those are the 3 different kinds of cash flow you can get. In a question, you must be able to identify, is this scenario that's in my question a lump sum that changed hands? Is it an annuity or is it a mixed cash flow? Because you'll calculate the value of that money differently according to which pattern of cash flow it is. Okay, so our learning objective, remember your learning objectives, and if you look at your module outline for Learning Unit 2, you'll see you've got a long list of learning objectives in this module, and you must know what they all are and make sure that you've ticked them all off, covered them by the time we get to test 1. Discuss the role of time value in finance. So that's more or less what we've already done, and in your textbooks you'll find the theory part that covers that. Explain the use of computational tools. That's on page 25 in your textbooks, and we're going to have a quick look at that at the start of our of the next part of the slides. Now the 3rd one says summarize the basic patterns of cash flow. In other words, know what those 3 different types of cash flow are and be able to explain them. And then discuss the concepts of future value and present value. So that's basically what we're going to have a look at now. Understand the concepts of future value and present value, and we must be able to calculate the future and present values for single amounts, and also understand the relationship of present value to future value. So the next learning objective says calculate future and present value for single amounts, and the one after that says describe the relationship of present value to future value. Okay, so if you go through your learning objectives at the beginning of this LU2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we are going to cover the first 6 learning objectives in today's class. So how to work with financial tables. So this is explain the use of computational tools. So you need to be looking in your textbooks, this on page 25. Okay, so we need to be able to calculate. We need some tools to assist us in working out the effects on the value of what we've got as a result of time. So we've got 3 different ways. We can use financial tables, which are printed in your textbook at the end of this chapter on page 59. If you go to page 59 to page 60, you'll see there are 4 pages of tables at the end of the chapter. You'll be using those tables to look up factors that you will then use in calculations. Okay. So on page 25, they've just taken a little mini snapshot of one of those tables to demonstrate. You can also use financial calculators. On page 26, they discuss financial calculators. And then the manual method, which is the 3rd method, is then to take a formula and manually calculate the formula out using an ordinary calculator, not a financial calculator, not the financial function on the calculator. Okay, so those 3 methods. So page 25, example 2.1. Sorry, just a second. So these tables are, we can use formulas, which we can learn, but these tables are a shortcut because they provide the present or future value interest factor, which we can then use as a shortcut to calculate either the present or future value. These factors in this table are derived from the formulas that we have got. So if somebody has sat down at one time and they've calculated all the formulas for all the different combinations of interest rates and periods that you can get, they worked out what the factor was and compiled it all up into this table to save us the time of having to do the calculation each time. Especially someone who doesn't understand the calculations, if you just give them the table, they can easily work out the present or future value of something without understanding the background of what calculations went into doing that. Okay, so these tables, and if you look, you can also look at the table, any one of the tables at the back of the chapter 2 to illustrate this. The top row across the top of the table, you can look at example 2.1, that is the interest rate. So in any question or scenario that you're looking at, you've got to say what interest rate is going to be applied over the period that the money was invested. Okay, and then you're going to look for your interest rate, choose that column, run your finger down the column until you get to the row, which is your very first column on the left, period, which tells you for how many years, essentially, not always years, let's use the word period, for how many periods, how many times interest will compound for that particular amount. So to keep it simple, for amounts that are lump sum amounts and interest is only applied once a year, if we were being charged 8% interest over 5 years, we would find 8% on the top row and then run our finger down the column to find the amount that then matched up with the period number 5 on the left-hand side. So wherever the 5 and the 8% and period 5 join together, 1.469, that is then going to be, what have we got here? A future value table. Your future value factor that you will then multiply your lump sum by, and the answer will give you the future value of that amount. So one important thing that I want you just to take note of here, if this is a future value table. So we're saying if I've got, what do they use in the example here? 1,000 Rand in the present, and I want to know how much that money is going to be worth in 5 years' time at an interest rate of 8%. I am then going to take my 12,000 Rand, multiply it by 1.469. Take note, I am increasing that 12,000 because I am multiplying it by a factor that's greater than 1. Okay, so for future value, your factor must be greater than 1 because your money is going to be worth more than 12,000 in the future, so you want to grow it. So you're going to multiply by 1.469 to get the future value. When you are working out the present value of something, which you're going to look at the present value factor now, then that factor, and this is for lump sums, must be less than 1. Because if we're taking a future value, say 17 point something thousand Rand, and I want to know how much was it worth 5 years ago, going back in time, 5 years ago, that amount would have been worth less, or I would have had, before the interest was added, I would have started out with a smaller amount. So I need to multiply that 17 point something thousand Rand by a factor that is less than 1, because the answer that I want must be less than 17,000. So let's have a look at this. So this is now working out a future value calculation. So we have 12,000 Rand. We are investing it at 8% for 5 years. We've looked up on our table that the future value factor is 1.469. I multiply my 12 by that factor and I get 17,628 Rand. That is then the future value of my present amount of 12,000. If we didn't have these tables, you could also sit down and calculate it like this on a piece of paper. 12,000 plus 8%, which I earned in year 1. So at the end of year 1, you had 12,960. Then you start year 2 with 12,960. And in year 2, you earn 8% of your total original amount plus the interest. So by the end of year 2, you've now got 13,996. Year 3, you start out with 13,996, which is your original 12,000 plus the 2 years worth of interest. And in year 3, you earn 8% on that new lump sum. And by the end of year 3, you've got 15, and so on. And you can calculate it manually. And by the end of year 5, you'll get 17,632, which is exactly what we got there when we used the factor from the table. And this also shows you, remember that I said if we've got 12 and I want to work out the future value, my factor must be greater than 1 in order to grow my money. If I'm multiplying that by a factor, the factor has to be more than 1. And you can, if you know the future value and you know the present value, we can now see how that relationship works. If we take the 17,632 as a proportion of the 12 that we ended out with, we can see I've now got 1.469 times the amount of money that I started out with. Then on page 26, we've got present value tables. So this is just going the other way. on page 25, that table is going from the 12,000 up to the 17,600, up to the 17,628. And now with the present value tables, we're just going backwards. We're going from the future back to the. Don't worry too much about the slides, guys, because this is coming directly. These slides are derived directly out the textbook. This stuff is in your textbook. And remember, I've told you last year, every word in your textbook and every example and everything is important. The slides will be uploaded. You know, we've got hassles with the system at the moment. So at the moment, we're not uploading anything until we know that the system is stable. All of this is in your textbook. So now we're going, I want to know what the present value of a future value is. So same thing, 8% over 5 years. But now what I know is that the future value is 17,628. So that's either an amount that I want to, that I know I've got a goal that I want to save up 17,628 over 5 years, or someone has told me that if I invest, if I make an investment with them now, I'll have 17,628 in the future. Then if they've said it will be invested or you must save up for 5 years and you'll get an interest rate of 8%, I want to know how much must I deposit today at a rate of 8% over 5 years in order to end up with 17,628 in the future. So now we just use the table that is the present value table. So remember at the back of the chapter I said you've got 4 tables. 2 of them are present value tables and 2 of them are future value tables. So when you are looking up amounts in the tables, please read the heading at the top of the table very carefully and make sure you choose the right table. You've got a future value and a present value of a lump sum table, and we've got a present value and a future value of an annuity table. So just check that you're using the lump sum or the annuity, depending on what your cash flow is, and that you've picked the present value or the future value, depending on which way your calculation is going. So on this table now, again, we're also going to go to the 8% column and the period 5 line, and where those two meet on the present value table, we've got a factor of 0.681. So this is a factor that is less than 1. So when I multiply 17,628 by 0.681, I'm going to end up with only 0.681 of 17,628, which is 12,000. And we can do the same thing if you know what the present value of the lump sum is and you know what the future value of the lump sum is. If we do it the other way around, present value over the future value, we can then come up with that same ratio, that my present value is only 0.681 of the future value. Okay, so remember this 0.681 is linked to the 5 years and the 8%. Whatever your rand value that you invest in could be all sorts of different amounts, but you'll use that same factor if you are wanting to know the present or future value of an amount invested at 8% over 5 years. So now we've looked at the tables and how the tables work. Now we're going to have a look at the formulas. Page 27. The only thing I don't have in these slides, which is in your textbooks, is the financial calculators. So let's just take a quick look at page 26 at the financial calculator. The third method of calculating our value. Has anybody got, have you guys got financial calculators? Okay, quite a few of you have. All right, that's good. So if you have got your financial calculator, hopefully you've got it with you, and then you can have a look at those, at the buttons that you're going to press. What have I done with mine? Guys, yeah, I know they are expensive, but please, it really is beneficial if you can get your hands on one. I know some of the third years do sell their calculators sometimes when they finish, so there are often second-hand calculators on the go somewhere as well if you don't want to buy a brand new one. But it is advisable. It is going to make your life easier throughout this whole year. It is one of the, what do they call them, prescribed things that you have to have for the module, so you should have one. It will make your life easier. Okay, so in your textbooks, page 26, the same calculation, but now using financial calculator. So financial calculators, they've done all the work for us. They've put all these, programmed the formulas into the calculator for us, so we don't have to work with formulas or tables or anything. We just have to know which buttons to press. We're going to be working with the same variables. In other words, we still have to have a future value, which is a rand value. We've got to have a present value, which is a rand value. We have to know for how many years or how many times interest will compound on our amount, and we need to know what the value of the interest is. Okay. So on your calculator, you've got a button called FV. That is the button you'll use to program in a future value. The PV button next to it is the present value, where you will program in the present value. Some calculators have an R, some have an I, small letter I. Whoops. That also equals interest rate. And then the N, small n on your calculator equals the number of what I'm going to call compounding periods. You guys did do this in second year financial management, so hopefully you remember number of compounding periods. Okay, so here's our formula: future value, present value, the R, which is the interest rate, and N, which is the number of years the money is going to be invested for. Same thing on your calculator. So in example 2.2 on page 26, just make sure the absolute key to not getting something wrong on your financial calculator is to make sure that all the memories are clear before you start a new calculation, because you can't see on the screen that it's got something saved in a memory, and you'll press the correct buttons but come up with the wrong amount because it's got some other amount in its memory that it's used. Also make sure that it's in the correct mode. So some of the financial calculators, in this little one that I'm using today, there's a mode, financial calculating mode, and I can see the letters FIN at the top of my screen, showing me it's in financial calculator mode. So that must also be true. They don't all work the same, but just make sure that you have got that in the correct mode. Some calculators have a stats mode, a normal mode, and a financial calculator mode. Okay. So clear all your memories, make sure you're in financial calculator mode, and then you are going to, example 2.2, we know that it's for 5 years, so you press 5, and then you press the N button. So what you've done now is we've programmed the value of 5 into the N variable. Then you press the 8 button, and you press the I key. So we've now programmed 8% into the interest rate button. Then we wanting to work out what the future value is. So we know that we've got 12,000 Rand present value. So this is just one of the things that's just unique to Financial Calculator. Type in 12,000 Rand, but you must make it negative. So you've got that little plus key that looks like a plus strokes, plus / minus. So on your calculator, you type in 12,000 and then press the plus or minus key, and it will make that 12,000 negative in the calculator. You'll see a minus sign appearing in front of the 12,000. And then when you've got that, you press the PV key. So we've now programmed 12,000 into the PV key. And then you press the comp button and then the FV button. So we're asking the calculator to compute the future value. And then when your computer's thought about it for a little bit, it should come up with 17, my one says 17631.93692. So one of the things that I want to show you here, when you're using the tables, we will get a rounded amount because our tables have got the factors worked out to 3 decimal places, whereas when you are using a calculator, you've got those infinite decimal places in the buttons when you're computing it. So our tables round this up to 17,631 point, what was it, 92. Where was it? But when you are working out on the calculator, you'll get a slightly different amount. So guys, it doesn't matter. In these questions, we allow for rounding. So where they have not dictated which method that you must use, you can use the tables, the calculator, or the formula, and you will get slightly different answers because of this rounding, but it's absolutely fine. So you would then obviously when you're writing the answer down on your answer book, you would say 17,631 and then round that to 94. Yes, they do sometimes in question papers say, please use the tables, or you must use the tables for this question, or you must use a financial calculator for this question, because they are testing that you guys know how to do all of the different methods. We know based on what your answer is, because you'll get a slightly different answer. And if you ask to use the tables, you will then have to write down that factor. Then if I see the factor in your answer, I know you've used the tables. If I see what you've written down, so if you look on page 26, you see this little table in the middle. Sorry, the table at the bottom in example 2.2. This is what you will write down on your answer book when they say use a financial calculator. You have to write down each key that you're going to press, and next to it, what value you pressed into that key. So you will write like this: N equals 5, I equals 8, PV equals 12, and then you will write down comp FV equals 17,631.94. That is what you will write down in your answer book. Then I know you've used the calculator. And if you're in your answer book, if you've written 12 times 1.469 equals 17.63, what is the amount that it rounds up to? 17,628, then I know you've used the tables. Okay, so this factor comes from the tables, and financial calculator, you have to tell me what you've programmed into your various keys. And don't forget, after each calculation, clear all of the, yes, most of the time you're allowed to choose tables, calculator, or formula. Sometimes you can't use the tables depending on what the formula is. Sometimes the formula is a little tricky and it might not match up with the table exactly. Then you need to use the formula. They can also ask you to use the formula. Although lately I see they seem to concentrate on the tables and the financial calculator, which is the two easy routes. Absolutely. But you can only, remember, Jared, you can only calculate 1.469, the factor, if you know the present value and the future value. Usually you've got one, either the future value or the present value, and they're asking you to calculate the other one. It is very confusing when you first start out. It is very confusing. And then you also have on page 27, the third method is then the formula. So if you look at the, so guys, just remember these slides that I've got do not have the financial calculator thingy typed in. You've got that in your textbook. This is then the formula. So if we're calculating the future value of a lump sum using a formula, my formula is the future value, FV, is equal to, and then this is what I have to calculate, PV, which will be my 12,000 Rand, multiplied by, open brackets, 1, which is a constant, plus R, which is my interest rate, so 1 plus 8%, which would be 1.08, close brackets, to the power of n. Okay, so superscript n, and then that n would be 5. So do it on your calculators now. Go and have a look on your calculators again and do this on your calculator. But now we're just using the normal buttons. We're not using those PV and FV and N buttons. So you will type in, my calculator is, it's easier to do the 1 plus R to the N first, and then I multiply it by the present value. I know some of those calculators they allow you to do it in. Okay, so this is what we want to work out. 12 times 1 plus 8%. I don't know if this is going to work on. Crap, what happened there? Okay, superscript doesn't, I don't know how to make superscript work in the chat. Okay, so this is what we want. We've filled in our variables. The formula says future value is equal to the present value, which is the 12, multiplied by 1 plus R to the N. 1 plus R to the N is going to be 1 plus 8%, but you've got to decimalize it. So 1.00 plus 0.08 to the power of N, and N is then 5. So on your calculators, I want you to work out. So we're going to end up with 1.08 to the power of 5. Work that out on your calculator. 1.08 to the power of 5. And what do you get on your calculator screen? Type in the chat box. I want to see what you guys got. On your calculators, 1 plus R to the N, you're going to type in 1.08 to the power of N. Yeah, so do you see what happened? So do you recognize that amount? Where have you seen that amount before? Where did you see that amount? 1.469. Go and look on page 25. Yes. So when I told you that somebody sat there and worked all these factors out and then compiled a table for us, what they did was they took this formula, because everything starts with the formula, right? They took the formula, they worked all the factors out and then put them into a table. So that 1469 from that means to give us a shortcut, we didn't have to multiply 1 plus r to the n. We just had to know that the interest rate was 8% and we invested it for 5 years, look it up on the table, and we could get that 1.469 factor multiplied by our 12 present value, and that gave us our future value. Okay. When you are using the financial calculator figures, you never see that 1.469. You don't see it at all. So the financial calculator is actually making us even dumber. We don't even have to use a factor or a formula. We just have to know what the values of each of the variables are, punch them in. That all those formulas are built into the financial calculator and it does it for us. But by looking at all three of these methods together and doing them, you can see that it's just different ways that we've derived as human beings to make our lives easier when we're trying to work out something. Okay. Okay, so our future value formula is used to determine what the value of an amount held now, today, day one, present value, will be at some date in the future. So if it's at the end of the year, we're talking about what will the value be at day 365. This incorporates the concept of time value of money, which states that, the concept states that an amount held today will have a different value at a future date. Yes, they do. If you go and look at past papers, you'll see we usually get a question and then they give you two different scenarios, and the one you have to calculate the present value and the other one you've got to calculate the future value. Oh, are you talking about, no, obviously they can't in the same calculation, because you have to know you've got to know one of the FV or PV in order to calculate the other. If you don't know what either your future value or your present value is, there's no calculation to be done. You have to have one or the other. And they will ask you both. You'll sometimes have to calculate present value, you'll sometimes have to calculate future value. Okay, so this is just that same thing we've looked at before, compounding. We covered this in second year in that chapter where we did interest. This looks exactly like that page of text in your second year textbook, where they're showing you, illustrating that when we talk about compounding is when interest is calculated on our original lump sum, we add it to our lump sum, and then in the period following that, we are earning interest on our original lump sum plus the first year's interest. So because the interest is now compounding, our money grows faster because we are earning interest on interest as well as on our lump sum. Okay, so the effect of calculating interest on interest is called compounding. So to get to the end of this future value section, example 2.3 on page 28, work through them, all three methods, please. The formula, the tables, and the calculator. And don't just sit there and read the book. You've got to have a piece of paper in front of you. Work out the formula on the paper, your calculator. You've got to punch in the buttons for the financial calculator one, comp, whatever it is, to check that when you press the keys on your calculator, you do get the same answer as in the textbook. You'll be very surprised when you read it in the textbook, you understand it and everything looks fine, but then you didn't pick up your calculator and try it out. And then you sit down in the test and then you suddenly think, oh gosh, I can't remember. Like you won't remember that in the formula, you must use 0.08 for the value of R. on your calculator, you've got to use the whole number 8 when you punch it in. Those little things like that are the things that are going to catch you out if you have not practiced. Which means you've got to have paper and pen with you at all times. You're scribbling and writing and working it out yourself all the time, and you've got your calculator in your hand. And then you're going to do question 2.2. And this is, I just want to read through this question with you before we go, because now, so far, we've kind of looked at these formulas as we just have done the future value of a lump sum. Okay, that's all we've done up to the point, future value of a lump sum. And it's a formula and it looks strange, but why do we? I will absolutely, Megan, yeah, I will. But in the meantime, I want you to practice with your calculator. Keep trying. I know I sometimes battle with that financial calculator and then I can't work out why I'm not getting the correct answer. Clear everything, try again, and there's always something that you're not doing. You either aren't making the present value negative or decimals wrong or something. The reason why we have got all of these formulas are to have solutions to real life problems. So if you look at question 2.2, it's in the old days at school what they used to call story sums, which is what financial management is all about. There's a problem, and the problem is a scenario or a story, and we are going to use computational tools to solve the problem. So on your 8th birthday, your grandfather, so okay, you are 8 years old, your grandfather gave you 5,000 Rand, it's a lump sum, and he invested it in a fixed deposit. So a fixed deposit means he took 5,000 once off, put it in a bank, and it's a lump sum being invested. And it's going to be earning interest at a rate of 8% per annum, compounded annually, which means interest is added once per year. That's very important. We're going to work on that later. And the fixed deposit is going to mature on your 18th birthday. Okay. So your grandfather has given you the little whatever contract for the fixed deposit. 5,000 Rand he put into the bank. You can only get the money on your 18th birthday. And over those years, it's going to be earning interest of 8%. So first of all, learn straight here, learn to recognize. We know what our future value formula is. We know what the future value keys on the calculator are. Now we've got to work out in our little scenario, what are we wanting to calculate? Are we wanting to calculate a future value or a present value? Assuming today is your 18th birthday, how much money is in the fixed deposit? Assuming today is your 18th birthday, how much money is in the fixed deposit today? Do you guys all agree with Megan and Lilani? We want to calculate a future value. That's quite correct. The value that we don't know is the future value. How much will I have when the savings matures? So we immediately then know we want the future value formula. So then we know that I'm just going to use the formula. We can use the same variables. We now have to decide what to put into each of those variables. So whether you type in the PV on your financial calculator or you're working it out in a formula, you now have to decide what is the value for PV. What is the value for PV? Yes, you guys, do you all agree? In other words, today, on your 8th birthday, which is the present in this scenario, you had 5,000 Rand. Okay. Now the rest of our formula, so we're now going to have 5,000 Rand times 1 plus R to the n. So now what's our value for, what will you write down for 1 plus R? 1 plus R in your little calculation, if you're doing it manually on a piece of paper, yes, 1 plus 0.08, 1.08. And if you are doing it on your financial calculator, you would then be using I equals, or so what would you type in on your financial calculator for yes, just the value 8. I'm writing in here I equals. On your calculator, you press the button I and you press the button 8. You don't press the equal sign. Or you can also press 8, press 8 and then press I. I don't know if it works the other way around. I think it does. I'm not sure. I'll test it out. I think you can press I and then 8, or 8 and then I. You can try it out. Okay. And then in our formula N, what will you put into the variable N? N you will write down or type in. What's the value for N in this scenario? Yes, 10. So 10 is the number of years, number of complete years that money will be accumulating interest, compounding once per year for 10 years. So you see, it's actually quite easy. It looks super complicated, but you've got to know your formula. You have to understand what each variable in your formula represents so that you can then write it down, identify correctly from your scenario. What I usually do, show the students to do on your question paper, as you're reading, let's say this question 2.2 was in a test paper. As you're reading it, you're going to take a pencil or your pen, and above each of these amounts, as you come across them, you're going to write above it the name of the variable that applies to. So on your 8th birthday, your grandfather gave you 5,000 Rand. So that happened in the past. So above the 5,000, you write PV because you've identified that the 5,000 is what you started with. That's the present value. Invested in a fixed deposit. So now you know above that you're going to write lump sum. 5,000 Rand invested in a fixed deposit. You've identified the cash flow pattern is a lump sum. So above fixed deposit, you write lump sum. Are you following me? If you do it like this, you will not get these questions wrong. Earning an interest rate of 8%. So above 8%, you write N. Compounded annually, and I'm going to teach you later the number of times interest compounds in a year. We've got another variable that we're going to use is called M. So in this instance, M equals 1 because it's compounding once per year. And the fixed deposit is to mature on my 18th birthday. So then we worked out as correctly you did that N then equals 10. So in my textbook here, under 18th birthday, I've written 10 years because that's where I was able to work out. I was 8, now I'm 18, that's 10 years. Then as you've read through the question, you now have all of the inputs to your variables written down in front of you. So now you can now pick up your financial calculator, punch them in, write down your formula, calculate it, and you'll get the right answer. And you will have saved time as well. So you must learn to do that. As you're reading questions and doing questions for homework, as you're reading the question, as you come up against an amount, try and immediately identify, is this the future value or the present value? Is this the value for my N? Is this the value for my I? And write it in. It's honestly going to make your lives much, much easier. Okay, so I know we've been online for an hour already, and I want to finish up here now. And what you are going to do on your own is read through the present value of lump sums or single amounts. I have touched on it already, and in the 2 tables we did at the beginning, we did look at the present value and the future value tables. Oh, the other thing we didn't do together now online is practice working out question 2.2 using the tables as well. Don't forget. Question 2.2, you could have used any one of the 3 methods. So now you are going to work through page 29 and page 30 to the middle of page 31 to the end of that little paragraph that says the relationship between present value and future value. That little paragraph is one learning objective on its own. There's a learning objective that says describe the relationship of present value to future value. And looking at the present value, so here's our present value formula. When we start in our wanting to calculate present value equals, we now take future value multiplied by 1 plus r, but instead of to the value of n, which we use when we want a future value, we put it to the power of minus n. N has to be a negative when you use it in your formula or in your formula, when you use it in your formula. And that's easy to remember, 1 plus r to the positive n. I want to end up with a larger amount if I'm calculating a future value. So my compounding that n must go forwards, multiplied by, multiplied by, multiplied by. So it must be to the power of positive n. If I'm calculating a present value, I have to go backwards in time to get a smaller and smaller and smaller amount, which means I am dividing by, dividing by, dividing by, to get back to the present value. So when I go backwards in time and I divide, it is to the minus n. Just remember, when you are using financial calculator calculating this formula, you don't put any pluses or minuses in for the n. The n is just still going to be 8. So whether you're doing future value or present value, n, the, oopsie, I pressed on, sorry, I was typing on the wrong thing. N will equal, you just type in 8. If you are working out the formula, where did I go through? If you are working out a formula, the formula is FV times 1 plus R to the minus N. Your tables have already worked it out. Remember, on the table, you've got 0.649. So when you multiply it, you're automatically going to end up with a smaller amount because your factor is less than 1. So it's all been worked out. It all makes sense when you sit and think about it and compare the one to the other. Yes, absolutely. I will definitely, yeah. So try, but I want you to practice with the calculator. Don't give up. Sit there. I know, and these calculators are tricky, and I don't have a lot of time in class to actually teach you guys how to use a financial calculator. So you are going to have to battle a lot on your own. But they've written most of it down in the textbook. So just keep practicing, because there's just, if you're not getting the right answer, there's something silly that you're doing wrong. You're either not clearing all of the memory. So please don't forget, you absolutely have to clear the memory first. If you don't do that, and all of the memories, if you don't do that, you won't get the right answer. Okay, so present value we've already talked about. We're just going in the other direction. So to practice your present value, you're going to work through example 2.4 on page 30, all 3 methods, and you are going to do question 2.3 using the present value tables as well as a present value formula and your calculator. So 2.3 you guys are going to do on your own. You've seen how I approach a question, how we did question 2.2 together. So when you do question 2.3, you're going to do it in the same way. What am I trying to calculate, a future value or a present value? And then right above each variable in the question, which variable that is, and then pick your formula and then work it out. Okay, so that by the end of today, when we start on Tuesday, we're going to start on page 31 with the future and present value of annuities and annuities due. We have to work quickly through this so that we finish all of the work and have got time for revision in class as well. So you do have to do lots of work on your own. Okay, so again, I know when you guys sit at home on your own and go through all of this, which is what you're going to do for your LAC hours, it will start making sense. But you have to spend time. If you don't go and invest the time, it's going to remain a mystery and you're going to fail Financial Management 3 because we use these formulas the whole year. First semester, second semester, in all of the other stuff that we do in risk and return and interest rate and bond valuation and share valuation and capital budgeting applications, we use these formulas, time value of money, in every chapter following till the end of the year. So invest as much time as you need, whether it's hours and hours, invest that in Learning Unit 2 to make sure that you understand and you can do all of this. Remember also in Test 1, you do not get a formula sheet. You have to memorize all of the formulas. So that's why these days mostly they ask you to use the tables or the financial calculator because they do not provide you with the formulas. But then remember what that means is if you do not have a financial calculator and you have not memorized your formulas, you are going to be sitting there battling because you can't always work everything out with the table. And sometimes they specify use a financial calculator. And then if you don't know what to do, I have to give you 0 for that question. Get one what? A formula sheet. Yes, you do, but it does not include the formulas in Learning Unit 2. I will post the formula sheet for you on more resources once we can post things. And also, guys, if you download, obviously not Test 1 because there's no formula sheet for Test 1. I think from Test 2 you get a formula sheet. So if you just download any Test 2 or exam past paper, and you'll see the formula sheet will be attached. And that same formula sheet you will get throughout the whole year. And it is just as well. I always tell the students download the formula sheet at the beginning of the year so that you're familiar right from the beginning with what is on the formula sheet and what's not on the formula sheet, because not every single formula is on the sheet. And you also need to get used to working with it. Okay, but we'll discuss that also when we get there. Okay, guys. Yeah, this is just that little paragraph on page 31. I'm going to try, I'm going to, your module does seem to be working okay for me. I know there were some students that said they weren't getting emails, notifications and the links, etc. I will try and upload a slide so far. I'll do that so that you have got them. And just hopefully I won't have to do it all over again if they reinstall the module. Okay. We've taken a long time, so thank you very much, all of you. I hope this is. I'm taking the time because it is super important now. We can't shortcut ourselves here. So you know what your homework is, and then practice all of that so that you've got everything from Learning Unit 1 and Learning Unit 2 up till the middle of page 31 under your belt when I see you on Tuesday. Thank you very much, guys. Why doesn't that stop recording work anymore?